Hi, it's Dr. Trussell. Let's talk quickly through some of the highlights of Chapter 11 from Giancola's textbook. This chapter is on interpreting our evaluation results. So before we interpret them, we want to be sure that we've been examining them sort of all along. This examining our results is an ongoing process that helps us. We want to be able to recognize potential problems early. It's the real benefit of having embedded evaluations that as we are doing the evaluation, we're also sort of checking for our results as we go. Helps us to investigate anything that's unanticipated that might be happening. Helps us know if we need to go back and change things before we move forward in our evaluation. Can help us really to save a lot of time and money if we recognize problems early on. And if we're not examining our results and our data as we go, we may miss some pretty major problems and get to the end of our evaluation and realize we really can't tell anything from all the effort that we've put in because of some early error or oversight or just unintended or unanticipated thing that's going on that we didn't catch. So we really want to be sure that we're examining our results as we go all along. There are some cases where that might not be true. For example, if we are doing an evaluation that's solely summative in nature, we're really just looking to see whether the program as a whole is effective, then we might save our data analysis until the very end when all the data are available. But typically when we're doing formative type analysis, which is the real value of these embedded evaluations, we want to be sure that we're looking things over on a regular basis, on an ongoing basis as we proceed through the evaluation. A couple different ways to examine results. First is quality of improvement, which is a systemic process through which programs are examined in order to improve implementation and outcomes, typically focused on a small part of your overall program. So it's very similar to evaluation as a whole, but rather than looking at a whole program, we're looking at smaller parts of it with an eye toward improvement or quality improvement. There are multiple models for how to do quality improvement evaluation. One that is pointed out as a favorite of the author of your textbook is the Plan, Do, Study, Act model, which allows us to pilot a small project and with 4 phases: plan, do, study, and act. So we plan our small pilot, then we implement it in the do stage. Program staff are implementing the pilot, and at the same time we're implementing, we're also, while we're in the do stage, we're also in the study phase. So concurrent with that testing, the program change, we're studying, we're examining our data, working closely with program leadership to identify areas of improvement. And then finally, in the last stage, the act phase, we're able to modify our program based on the findings of our pilot. And then, once those 4 phases are done, we're never done as an evaluator, particularly when we're working with embedded evaluation. So we start over. Once those modifications are determined, our cycle starts over with that modification being planned, implemented, studied, and revised. Another process or tool that we have for examining results as we go in an ongoing way is member checking. So member checking is the process of reviewing qualitative results to reduce researcher bias, to verify, validate, or determine credibility of researchers' account of results. It lets us get systemic feedback. It allows research participants to provide feedback after having the opportunity to review, check, confirm, or deny evaluation results. So this is where we've sort of collected some data, we've got some preliminary results that we see emerging, and we go check them with stakeholders. And we let stakeholders give us feedback on what seems to be going on at earlier phases in our evaluation. This allows us to verify the results we're seeing as we go, rather than getting all the way to the end of our whole total evaluation and saying, oh, here are my results, and having stakeholders turn around and say to us, that makes no sense, right? We want to be sort of checking those things as we go along, that here's what I think I'm seeing. How does that sound to you? The kind of questions that we're asking as we go. That's member checking. So we just want to keep in mind that our focus really in this course is on the embedded evaluation process. So we're talking about these things that are going on throughout the evaluation process. Examining our results is part of that, that we're looking for these preliminary themes emerging. We're doing interpretation of results on small scales as we go, so that we can identify any sort of early issues or problems. But then on the sort of larger, on the whole, interpreting our results at the end of our evaluation is also very important, to be able to interpret and present the results of our evaluation. So our results are interpreted in conjunction with our logic model, what we expected to be the links between our strategies and our theory. So we want to interpret our results in relation to our proposed program or our proposed program theory, which helps us link our strategies to our goals, I should say. And we also shouldn't shy away at this point, when we're interpreting our results, from updating our logic model. The more detail, or the more sort of accurate tweaks we can make, or tweaks for accuracy we can make to our logic model, the more we have something that we can use for reporting or disseminating at the end of our evaluation. So update our logic model to represent what we found to truly be the theoretical links between our strategies and our goals, if those links exist. Hopefully we have found that those links exist, and in many cases we probably will have found that those links exist in ways that we expected, but if not, we shouldn't be afraid to tweak that logic model, so that in the end we have a nice logic model that truly represents what our program is doing and why. Results interpretation should be made, so it should be made in conjunction with our logic model, also collaboratively with our stakeholders, which can facilitate everyone's understanding of our findings. And we should be sure that we're addressing the relationship between our implementation and our long-term goals. That's especially important for programs implemented by different people or at different times or different sites. We want to be sure that we address in our interpretation any differences in implementation across different sites. So if you're, for example, implementing a new program in schools and you implement it using more than one teacher and more than one classroom, you want to make sure that you note any differences in how those teachers approach the program, so that you understand any differences you see in outcomes. As we're interpreting results, there are some standards of accuracy that have already been set. So the Joint Committee on Standards for Educational Evaluation, for example, includes 12 standards related to the accuracy of our reported evaluation results. We want to be sure that our evaluation results, that our conclusions are justified explicitly in our evaluation reporting. Anything that you put in your results that you believe to be a conclusion of your study, you want to be sure that that conclusion is justified, and not just justified in your mind, but justified explicitly in your written report and your results, so that any stakeholders who are viewing your reports can make determinations about the accuracy of your interpretation of what's going on. Also, other accuracy standards, want to be sure that we are keeping accurate program documentation, considering the context of the program when we interpret our findings, collect reliable and valid information, use appropriate analysis, techniques for analysis, and ensure that our reporting of our findings is impartial. There are 4 dimensions of value that help us to be mindful about providing reliable and valid justification. They are merit, worth, significance, and probity. So merit is the value that evaluations should take into account and explicitly address accepted standards of quality. Worth, evaluations that are valuable to the group of people or an area of need. Significance, evaluations take into consideration implications of findings, including their importance and potential influence beyond the program itself. And probity, evaluations are conducted with integrity, using ethical practices, honest interpretation of data. So we should keep these 4 values in mind as we design our program evaluation, and then also as we interpret our results to be sure that we are providing reliable and valid justification for any conclusions that we draw. And your book takes pause here to caution against some, you might be surprised how often these sort of errors are made. So one is overinterpretation. Unless you have a randomized controlled trial, your evaluation is not going to be able to definitively provide causal conclusions. You may be able to say that there's a link between your program and certain outcomes, but it's not, you won't be able to say without reservation that your program caused certain outcomes. So you want to be sure you don't over-interpret your results and state a claim that you have, that your findings are a direct result of programs, activities, or strategies when your research design doesn't warrant that causal conclusion. You also want to be sure, so overinterpretation is one form of misinterpretation, but there are others. So you also want to be sure that you don't claim your findings are something different than they are. You don't want to interpret your findings incorrectly. Misinterpreting a finding means you have, might mean you have overinterpretations where you're claiming causality that doesn't exist. It could be wrongly concluding what the results actually mean. You want to be able to guard against misinterpretation. One way to do that is to be sure that you document the program's environment, keep track of the circumstances under which your results are obtained, and provide thoughtful description of what all was going on when you collected your data, and that those circumstances then help to justify your interpretations, and help to make sure that your interpretations are not misinterpretations or overinterpretations. So we've examined our results as we go. Now we're interpreting our results, and then a really key element of program evaluation, if you want your evaluation to be useful for making change, is being able to communicate your results. So several ways of communicating. One is just through that quick feedback, keeping in mind that we're talking about ongoing evaluations, embedded evaluations. It's logical and also helpful to think about opportunities, to plan in opportunities for quick feedback so that you can improve operations as you go. Your formative findings. You're continually communicating those findings in sort of quick, informal ways to program staff in order to help improve operations. Programs have the best chance of success if evaluation findings are communicated to program staff in an ongoing and regular basis. Formative findings are critical to program improvement, and so setting a schedule for regular meetings between program staff and evaluation team and building those communications into the evaluation timeline and plan from the beginning ensures that your evaluation findings can really help the program during its operation. It's important to keep in mind, though, even though these may be somewhat informal communications about results, that you still need to maintain that ethical obligation of confidentiality. Don't walk into a quick little meeting and just because it feels informal, feel like you can just start sharing stories with identifiable information about subjects or participants. So you want to make sure that you keep things ethical, keep things above board, but at the same time provide that quick and ongoing feedback. As you're providing, communicating your results, just like in any form of communication, it's important to keep in mind who your audience is. You'll likely have multiple audiences for your results, and so you may use multiple methods of communicating those results. You'll want to tailor your communication to your audience. You would ask questions like, what background do they have regarding the program, and what do they need to know? How much time and interest will they have in hearing or reading my communications? And what do I want them to know? But ultimately, as you tailor your communication to your audience, think about what it is they already know, what they need to know, what you want them to know. Your goal is to provide in each of these settings for each of your audiences an evidence-based foundation for decision making. So you've thought about who your audience is. Now you have to think about the format of your of communicating your results. You could have formal reports. These are most common and almost always will come at the end of an evaluation. This is your written comprehensive report developed for key stakeholders and sponsors. It's typically longer than other forms of result communication and contains really all the details of the purpose of the evaluation design, results, conclusions, discussion, etc. You've also got, for other audiences, it may be more appropriate to have a quick report. And this is supplemental and could be either formal or informal. These are those reports we were talking about a couple of slides back where we discussed, or a slide back, when we discussed having those ongoing meetings to give quick reports of what's going on, providing frequent feedback to improve implementation. You've also got the option of a brief. A brief is a shortened form of the full evaluation, similar to an executive summary that would be, in fact, part of your comprehensive report would be an executive summary. You could just pull that straight out and call that your brief. It's a lot of times created to accompany a formal report. You can use that brief as your executive summary, and as a standalone document. So a brief is sort of a quick look at the evaluation for those who don't have the time or interest in going through the comprehensive report. Infographics are typically a one-page, quick, graphically enhanced documentation of results. Lets you present or communicate a snapshot of your results, very easily accessible, very understandable for folks from a variety of backgrounds. But of course, not as detailed. Oral reports or presentations, These can give you the opportunity to get feedback and to have maybe Q&A sessions around your findings, to engage stakeholders and communities. And storytelling often can be part of any of the above forms of communication. This is where you include in your findings, your evaluation findings, the voice of your participants. You can use, again, multiple modes of delivery. This could be in your in written work, in oral reports, but this is where you give authentic, genuine, and accurate context to your findings. Might involve videos, narratives, theater, poetry, music, art, any form of including your participants' voices. With all these options for reporting and communicating your results, and knowing that you may use multiple forms of communication for different audiences, it's important to keep track of what information you've released and in what form, so that you always know what reports have been created for your evaluation and who knows what as a result of what you've released. As you write your report, particularly that comprehensive long report, you want to be sure that it is comprehensive and that it's convincing. More than providing a comprehensive and concise report for stakeholders, a strong evaluation report has to leave the reader convinced of the substance of the report and with a clear understanding what to do next. It should be accessible to all. The content of the report might be technical, but it should be concise and clear in its message. People who are not directly familiar with the program or the evaluation, or even with the technical knowledge for evaluating, should still be able to read and glean from this report. They should still be able to appreciate your findings and your justification of your findings. There are several core components of a report. The cover page makes it look professional. Your executive summary, which gives a synopsis of the program evaluation, the key findings. Your table of contents, optional but nice to have. An introduction, which provides a background on the program itself, the details, the structure of the report, description of each section that's going to come. Your program description, so report section that provides a detailed description of the program, include the history of the program, who funds the program, if applicable, what are the program goals, objectives, what are the program strategies, and here's where you would put a copy of your logic model that demonstrates graphically those things that you're writing about, the strategies and the goals and how they're connected. Then you will have a section of your report that's for your evaluation design and methods. You want to be sure you give a description of the evaluation purpose, your evaluation questions, your overall research design. You want to give your methods then. You want to have a description of your indicators, your targets, your data sources, your data collection methods. These are all the things that you have already put in your evaluation matrix, which you will describe in your text, and then you also can include, probably should include, in fact, that evaluation matrix, which is the sort of snapshot, organized view of all of these, the elements of your evaluation design and methods. Then you'll have a section for your evaluation findings. This is where your results are organized. You want to organize them sequentially. You want to align them with your evaluation questions, state a question, and then give the data that informs that question and the results that you find. Details about your statistics, your themes, your sample sizes, things like that go here. You'll give your conclusions. Your evaluation findings are summarized, they're shortened, they're comprehensive. Your conclusions will consider the implications of those findings on the program. which flows right into your next session, which is your recommendations, where you offer solutions. How might we change or improve our program or its processes based on the results of our evaluation? And then, of course, anytime that you write something, you want to include your references, and if necessary, any appendices of supplementary materials that might be useful to those who are reading your report. As you're writing, you want to be sure that you are writing with clarity. Use language of your targeted audience. Don't use a ton of jargon. Make sure that anyone who's reading this, it's accessible to anyone who's reading it, and make sure that it's culturally appropriate. You're going to, by doing these things, by making sure that your language is accessible and appropriate, you'll increase the credibility and usability of your results. You want to be sure your results are timely. You should document your evaluation plan in the very beginning, should document reporting times. When are we going to come together and talk about our the results that we're seeing? You'll have those ongoing meetings, and you'll also have a plan for a timeline for producing your comprehensive reporting at the end. Remember, your goal is improving implementation, and if you don't report in a timely way, it's really hard to use your results to improve implementation. Also, to add value and credibility to your report, you want to acknowledge your shortcomings. No evaluation is going to be perfect. You won't always be operating in perfect circumstances to be able to collect data, all the data you wanted, or in exactly the ways you wanted. Sometimes you won't be able to use a random control trial, for example. You want to be sure that you acknowledge those shortcomings. It doesn't make you look like a failure. It doesn't make your evaluation look weak. In fact, it makes your evaluation look more credible if you don't claim to have done things you haven't done. So be sure you acknowledge your limitations, be transparent, and in that way, you certainly add value and credibility to your report. And lastly, when appropriate, when possible, use graphics. Data visualization increases readers' understanding, as long as you're careful with it. You don't want to put in graphics that aren't helpful or that are so cluttered that it's impossible to glean anything from them. But there's lots of different methods, ways to display findings. Handle your data carefully. Make sure your graphics are readable and interpretable. And if so, they certainly can go a long way to increase readers' understanding of the things you're trying to show.